remove the pain and heal that relationship in your life. And then you go, I don't understand. I've been praying and nothing happens. And that's exactly where we come in. Daring to wait on God. Because if every prayer that you prayed has been answered by God, then you are spoiled brat in the presence of God. Because you think that God is a vending machine that you can just drop a coin and select the thing and then push the button, enter, and then all of a sudden you got it. But that's not how it works with God. And God sometimes has to work on me, on you, before He works on the solution that we want to see. Because our first verse is in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11 says, God does everything just right and on time. But people can never completely understand what He's doing. Right? That's very true. Because if you would understand everything that God is doing, then you are God. But no, we're not God. We will never understand exactly what God is doing, but that's the point. We're here to wait on God, on what He wants to teach us. And so today I'd like for us to look on two very important things in this life. We're going to answer two important questions in life. First question, what do I need to remember when I am waiting on God? Right? So what do I need to remember? The second thing is, what do I need to do? So the first part is, we need to remember 5 things when we're waiting on God. And then the following point is, what are we going to do? What do I need to do when or while I'm waiting on God? Did you know that waiting is as much, or it takes faith, just like when you take an initiative. So when you wait on God, it takes faith when you wait on the Lord. Because waiting can teach us so much in this life when the Lord lets us wait for Him. So number 1, what do you need to remember when you're waiting on God? First of all, remember there's a natural delay between planting and harvesting. So this is actually the follow-up to the message last Sunday, that by faith, when you plant a seed, you wait until you don't dig it the next day and check if it's already growing. No, you just leave it there until all of a sudden, after 3, 4, 5 days, it just sprouts. But then, if you have a garden, you plant an eggplant, and you plant it today, you cannot expect harvest tomorrow, right? You really have to wait. So there is a natural delay between the time you plant and between the time you harvest. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. Thank you. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 5 in our screen. I don't know if everybody can see the back. But for those of you who can see clearly, can you please read this with me? Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. This is simply talking about seasons, right? In this life. So that when you plant today, you have to wait until the time of harvest. You always get the results of what you plant in another time, in another season. Not the same season. So you don't plant and harvest in the same season. Many of you, or some of you, have already planted at this time, at this moment in our Daring Faith. Many of you have already planted the seeds of daring faith. Maybe a financial seed, maybe seeds of service, or seeds of sacrifice. So when you have planted that, you have to wait for the harvest. You cannot expect a return right away by next week or by next month. But you have to wait on the timing. And during the waiting time, during that season of waiting, you don't panic. What you do is you wait quietly. You wait patiently. You wait expectantly in faith. And so remember, when your prayer has not been answered since last month or 3 months ago, just wait on the Lord, because it's going to come. It's going to come. There's a natural delay between planting and harvesting. Number 2, the second very important reminder for all of us while we wait on the Lord is that we need to remember there's an unseen battle going on. Did you know that every time you pray, whenever you pray, you send your prayer to God in heaven? I know He hears our prayer right away. It's not that our prayer travels long travel, but God hears that. But then when we pray, Satan always hinders us. He always throws darts of doubt in our minds. We are reminded in the Bible that there is a spiritual warfare going on in the spiritual realm that we don't know, that we don't see, but it's happening. Because in Galatians chapter 6, verse 12, it says, we are not struggling and fighting against human beings, or flesh and blood in other translations, but against evil spiritual forces in the heavenly realm, the rulers, authorities, and powers of darkness. And what is this verse saying is that when you send up a prayer, there's often a battle on how that's going to be answered. And Satan throws all kinds of darts in our mind. Darts of discouragement, darts of disappointment, darts of depression, and so much more. As many as he can throw in your mind so that you will not be able to focus on your prayer. So if you're writing down in your outline, I want you to write this down. A delay is not a denial. So when your prayer is being delayed, that doesn't mean that God is denying your prayer, because it's just being delayed. Now, if you open, it's not in our PowerPoint, it's not even in our outline, but I just want to read Daniel chapter 10, verses 10 to 14. Daniel chapter 10, verses 10 to 14. Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. Verse 11. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. While he was speaking these words to me, I stood trembling. Verse 12. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. Verse 13. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Verse 14. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision refers to many days yet to come. This is almost science fiction. That Daniel was praying, and then the answer has not been there for 21 days because the angel that was supposed to bring the answer was delayed because of a struggle with the enemy, the devil. And so, this is a comfort to us. We need not be discouraged because God will always be victorious. Number 3, to remember when we are waiting on God is that we need to remember God is preparing me for His blessing. God is preparing me for His blessing. The first thing God wants to do before He answers our prayer is to get us ready. Because sometimes we ask and then we're not ready for the answer to our prayers. And most of the time, God is more interested in our character than in the answer to our prayer. He wants to see our heart. He wants to see how we're going to react when we receive the answer to our prayer. Just like us parents. Sometimes our kids, when they were small, would ask things that will not be good for them. So we want them to understand. We prepare them before we give them the blessing or the answer to what they desire. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 to 7 says, there is wonderful joy ahead, even though it is necessary for you to endure many trials for a while. These troubles test your faith. You see that? These trials that you experience, they test your faith to show that it is strong and pure, just as fire tests and purifies gold, and your faith is far more precious to God than mere gold. You see here in this verse, the testing that we experience, the delay that we experience is just a test from the Lord. And he even said, just as fire tests and purify gold. Some of you right now are going through the fire of problems, of trials. The Lord is telling you, keep going in this life, because this trouble that you're experiencing right now will pass, because God is faithful. So, waiting is always a test. And I can see that many of you are actually thinking, because most of the time we don't like to wait, especially when we're about to go to church. And I would always say, we're leaving at 8:30 in the morning. And then you go to the car and you sit there and you wait and you wait. But there are times when, just like today, everybody's on time. And they were actually telling me, hey Dad, we're on time. We're actually 2 minutes earlier. So the reason why I want us to leave at 8:30 is because we have a prayer time at 9 o'clock here. So I don't want to be late on that. So waiting is always a test. When you're praying for something in your life and it hasn't been answered, it is God testing your character. It's testing your faith, our endurance, and all kinds of tests in this life. Now, let me give an example about waiting. When a mother is expecting a baby, they don't call it, whenever a pregnant woman was asked, what are you expecting, a boy or a girl? The mother wouldn't say, oh, I'm not expecting anything. But it's so visible, right? They wouldn't answer that, right? Oh, we're expecting a boy, or we're expecting a girl. And the mother couldn't see the baby, although now you can see the baby in the ultrasound. Like before, it's like a blurry thing, but now you can actually see it clear. Maybe in the future you will see the baby inside in 3D, so clear. But in the past, when a woman is pregnant, they know there's life inside her, and she's expecting that, and she knows that the time will come that baby will come out, and she will hold that precious life. That's exactly what God is telling us. Our answer, His answer to our prayer is there. It's going to come. But we have to expect it, because He's getting us ready for His blessing. And what a joy for a mother, after the labor, after the pain, to see that precious life come out as a gift of God. So, waiting. Number 4. The fourth thing I need to do is to remember that when I'm waiting, I am actually in a good company of people that have waited in this life. We are in good company whenever we're waiting for God, because millions of saints, millions of Christians have sat in God's waiting room. So don't feel that you're alone when you're waiting on God right now. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 2 says, people who lived in the past became famous because of their faith. And every one of them had to wait. Like Hannah in the Old Testament. Hannah waited years before Samuel was given to her, and she gave him back to the Lord. Think about Joseph. Joseph had to wait years before the dream that God has given him was fulfilled. Along the way of his life, it didn't went well, because after his brother sold